Dana White commented on this historic deal with Paramount/CBS. And he was saying how incredible this is, of course, for UFC fans. For the first time, instead of paying for pay-per-view, it'll be streaming. So this signals the future of sports viewership. I think overall, people can now watch fights on this massive platform. ESPN, of course, they had a partnership with UFC for years. It was already ending this year, 2025. So this is this new way to watch. I think that, like I said, gone are the days where people would be doing pay-per-view. You'd have to go to the local bar or pay specifically for this package. Now it's just another way to watch UFC fights on streaming. And I mean, this truly is the future of sports. I think that this is the shift. This is here. This is how we are going to be seeing this. And the fact that this deal was so historic and so much money, it's just, I think that we're going to keep seeing it go up and up. I mean, there's so much money to be made in these partnerships. So it'll be interesting to see, kind of how this evolves. But I think this is setting the precedent from here on out as far as sports viewership and streaming. Shifting gears here, I thought this was such an interesting talking point, little topic. Christie Brinkley has been in the news lately. She always is, because she just continues to age backwards. I don't know what she's drinking, what water. I know she has a wine line. Maybe it's that. But she had a controversial take on traditional marriage. So it's kind of raising some eyebrows. The question is, of course, is traditional marriage dead? And she, who has been married a couple times, I'm trying to see, I think she's been married 3 times. I could be 4, but she basically proposed that every 5 years, people enter into this contract and then they can opt to either renew it. I keep hitting my water, or not. So, every 5 years, she's saying you could reevaluate. And she said that, her beliefs have evolved over time with different divorces. She said she no longer believes in traditional marriage. I don't know if she means that specifically for her or a commentary on society as a whole. But basically, she was opening up to People magazine recently in this interview, and she said she thinks that you can get married and then see if you want to renew it these every 5 years. That way, if you're getting bored, you can get out of it without lawyers or attorneys. So I'd love to know people's thoughts on this. I do think more and more people are opting out of the traditional marriage mindset. I think, for years, what people would always say is the divorce rate is 50%, if not higher. I know it differs by state. There are all these random statistics. If you wait traditionally longer to get married, I think those marriages tend to last a little longer. I don't know if it's because people tend to have more financial stability if you get married at 35 versus 20, and not having that financial stability can be really stressful. Also, I know there are statistics and people wait longer to get married. And again, these are all stereotypes. Of course, there's exceptions to every rule. But, the thought is if you have vested more in life experience, you'll have higher earning power if you're waiting to get married later, or higher income, instead of just, it's rough if you start your life at 21, 22 getting married. But, there's some 21-year-olds out there that are so mature compared to the F-boys you see running around at 37. I mean, it's like age again. It's just a number, and everyone's maturity and life experience is different. But to generalize, to answer Christie Brinkley's proposed idea, I don't love the idea of the 5-year contract, because it's like, either just don't get married, period, which I have always been a proponent of. Marriage only if you want to enter into it. Don't do it because you think it's what everyone else is doing. I'm an independent thinker. I've always been that way. I don't like doing what everyone else does just for the sake of it. And so if it feels right for you, awesome. But there's a second part to that, and that is I take it so seriously. So I feel like this is direct opposition to that. If you are going to go all in, if you are going to get married, then I would be prepared to give it your all. And don't just think that having some light fight is, it's not like a breakup. It's a legal contract. And that's the main reason a lot of people don't want to enter into it. And I don't know if maybe she was talking specifically for people who are uber wealthy and they have more to lose as far as assets. I guess that could make sense specifically for like a certain tax bracket. But I mean, that takes away from the romance of it too, if you think about it. I just don't like the idea of the 5-year contract, because then I think you're going into it. How is that any different than dating someone? And especially the stakes are higher, because if you're married, chances are you're going to oftentimes have kids together. And so what a callous way to go into it, thinking, okay, in 5 years, we'll just look at each other and see if we're bored. And marriage can be boring sometimes. It can be mundane. It can be amazing and incredible. And there are highs and lows. And I think anyone who's been married 2 years or 25 will tell you that. So I don't know. I think it's a really weird take. But maybe she knows something we don't. She has been married a couple times. Maybe she has more wisdom, or maybe she just isn't great at marriage. You look at it either way. Speaking of, 2 to 25 years, something that is, I can't even believe this anniversary is being celebrated, but the classic movie Clueless is celebrating 30 years. This is such a cultural phenomenon. If you never saw it, you have to. It is an absolutely incredible movie. It's actually based on the original story of Emma, Jane Austen, about this girl that kind of meddles in people's dating lives. But she's this hopeless romantic herself, and she likes to pair up people, but when it comes to herself and her love life, it's kind of a mess. That's the simplest way to put it. But so when Clueless came out 30 years ago, like, what would that be? 2025. So it was 95. That's insane. I was a young kid. I probably saw it when it was a couple years after having been released. It literally changed my life. Here was this girl, their modern day take on Emma was Cher, who's in Beverly Hills. Her mom's passed away. She's spoiled, but she's smart. She has her friends who she's trying to pair up, and then her life is a mess. It really does mimic the classic Emma, but it's so well written. It was such a cultural phenomenon at the time. It's the soundtrack, the style, her iconic Alaya dress. She wears this red dress in this one scene. She gets pulled over and she has to get down on the ground. She's like, I don't want to ruin my Alaya. It's just, you have to see it. I can't, that's one of those movies that I've seen like countless times. I could tell you almost every single line. But yeah, it's hard to believe it's 30 years old. And one thing I will say is I feel like nowadays they're making less and less of these movies that in 30 years, I think we'll look back on and be like, oh, this was so iconic. Because I feel like every freaking movie out nowadays is a remake. And as I'm saying that, I realized that Clueless was technically a remake of Emma, but it was like its own spin. It was its own story. They completely, if you had never read the historic Jane Austen film, you still would love it. A storyline. It was like such a cultural phenomenon, and it has stood the test of time. And I wish they made more movies like that nowadays. And I love film, and I hope it's not a dying art, but the film industry is suffering right now for sure, for a lot of reasons. So I'm hoping that it sees this resurgence. All right, I thought this was interesting. This was a TikToker, and it was just kind of a talker that they posted. This woman was talking about the culture shock of marrying someone who she calls a payer, when she says you grew up with a different type of dynamic. So for instance, her dad, she says, was a doer. So are you married to a payer? Was your dad a doer? If you're a female, or vice versa. Was your dad kind of a payer? If, my faucet's leaky, I'm going to pay someone to take care of it? Or is your spouse then the doer who's like, I'm Mr. Fix-It, I'm going to do it myself? So she was saying no one tells you how difficult it is to be used to one thing and then have the other. So her account is called The Girl with the Pink Glasses. I just thought this was so interesting. I had a funny combination. Okay, so I married definitely a payer. No offense to my husband. I love him. He actually will try to fix things, but he's definitely more of like, okay, I'm going to trust the experts. If something is leaky or broken, I'm going to bring in the big guns. I would rather just someone who has spent a lot of time invested in knowing what they're doing and doing it right, rather than like me try to fix it and then it go wrong and have to then pay for it to be ruined. So my dad was a doer, but he probably should have been a payer, because a lot of times he would like make things worse. No offense, John Weber. I admire like the gumption, but I do think it's an interesting thing. And it's like so many things when you get married and you're used to this dynamic with like a parent, and then sometimes your spouse has completely different traits. What would your preference be? Would you rather be with someone who's a doer, who like either knows, is super handy around the house if you're a female or male, or even if they don't know, they're like Mr. Fix It, they'll like look it up on YouTube and like get under the hood of the car and try to fix this? Or would you rather have someone that's like, it's okay, I got this, and just pull out the credit card? I feel like either can be good depending on the scenario. There are certain things where it's like, I'm so not handy. I would love a guy who just like immediately knows how to fix this and that, but it's not a deal breaker. And I feel like what my husband is I'm equally happy with him just being like, okay, who do I got to call to take care of this? So I guess it's a matter of preference. I would love to be a doer, though, with like DIY home projects. That is something that perhaps I'm going to do in this next decade. I know I keep talking about turning 40, but I think I'm just mentally preparing myself as I have been the past 6 months. But that is something I would love to do, reclaim furniture. Yeah. So, okay, maybe in the next couple of years, you'll see me and I'll be Miss DIY. I'm here for it. I don't think I'll ever be like a car person, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. All right. And speaking of just interesting talkers, this happened a few months ago, actually, but it really did spark a debate with a lot of people online. So Colombian singer Maluma, he stopped a concert. He is this huge, huge singer, and in the States, but internationally, I think even more so. And he was in Mexico City at this concert. And all of a sudden, he looks out in the crowd, and even performing for thousands and thousands of people, he saw a parent there with their tiny baby. So he actually stopped his concert to scold this mom for bringing the baby to the show without headphones. So basically, he said, hey, be more self-aware. You shouldn't be here with a kid if you don't have the proper protection. Think about that. And so it opened up this debate of, should artists shame people who have spent their hard-earned cash to go to their concerts? You know, was he being entitled or was he in the right? I think that in an instance like that, as a parent, like, more power to him. I had to think about this because I'm like, okay, on one hand, I could see people being like, really? Like, you're going to stop the concert for everyone else who's enjoying it? But that just shows he cares, because that is like, literally, a little kid could go deaf, like not having the proper ear protection. So I don't think he was being an asshole. I think he was just looking out for the kid. And I do think it is interesting because I think a lot of artists are kind of being more open about, like, if they see something wrong, they're stopping concerts nowadays. And obviously we've seen like horrific things happen, like Travis Scott a couple years ago, Astro World, I think it was, that concert in Texas where like people got killed, and he was criticized for not doing enough to basically stop and step in. And I'm paraphrasing that whole situation. Look it up, Astro World. But it was this like horrific event where people got hurt or even killed. And no artist wants that, you know, from a humanity aspect. And then just from like, obviously, bad press and like just a horrific thing. They don't want that to happen at their concerts. So I was at a Miranda Lambert concert with a girlfriend in Vegas like last spring, and she stopped it because people were just like being rude and heckling her. And, you know, I think she might have had a couple cocktails. Girl loves a cocktail. You can tell she's like open about it. And it was Vegas. So everyone was having a good time, Miranda included. She was just singing at her concert, having fun. And then she called out someone who I think he was just like heckling and being rude. He must have been close up to the stage for her to even like be aware. But she called him out, and she actually had security come and take him out. And I think we are seeing that more and more. And also you have to think about, in that instance, like maybe the artist feels threatened. You don't know. Unfortunately, we live in a day and age where even with security, there are bad things that continue to happen when you get a lot of people together in a space like a concert. And so I think that artists and the people around them and everyone is just trying to mitigate that. But, you know, to call out a parent because you feel like the kid is in danger or perhaps going to have damage to their hearing because of something that there's a simple solution to, I don't think he was being an asshole. I think he was in the right. So you gained a new fan. All right. Well, I want to talk about this phenomenon that's going on. I think it is the year of the Millennial revival. I feel like we are time traveling back to early 2000s, late 90s. There's an NBC article that was just talking about this earlier this week, and it was just saying how good a time it is to be a millennial. I am here for it. One of the biggest instances of this is, of course, the Backstreet Boys, their residency at the Sphere in Las Vegas, which I saw, and it was just absolutely incredible. It was so timely. It brought so much joy to my heart to see them. Everyone was decked out in white. You know, it was the Millennium theme. That was their album back in the day. And I just loved how everyone showed up and were sporting their white. Everyone was dancing. It was like the most fun concert, the most fun I've had in so long. So many millennial, early aughts, late 90s things are coming back. Lindsay Lohan's resurgence, her comeback. She looks better than ever. Of course, she's in her new movie that is another remake. I know I was talking shit on remakes, but this one I'm here for, Freakier Friday. My millennial heart is so happy lately. And then another show that I was absolutely obsessed with. I think I was in middle school when this was around, which ages me, but it's fine. You're probably my age-ish too if you're listening to this. And if you're not, go back and watch the original Dawson's Creek, because this show was like a after school, early evening, almost like the era of like Party of Five, a little later than like Melrose Place or 90210. Those were probably like 10 years even earlier. So I was almost too young for those. But Dawson's Creek was like late 90s. This soap drama. It was like this beach town. It had Katie Holmes, Joshua Jackson. They were love interests, James Van Der Beek. They were all in the show, and it was such a good show. And so Katie Holmes and Joshua Jackson were seen recently filming a project together, literally 20 years later after their show. I'm so here for it. Katie seems to be thriving. She was, of course, married to Tom Cruise. We don't talk about those years. They since divorced. She got out of his clutches, his claws. And Dawson's Creek, I think it's got to be streaming somewhere. That just reminds me I have to go check it out because I want to like rewatch it, you know, from the beginning towards the end. It just was so good. And it's not the same anymore. This is one thing I will say that like is the upside to streaming is we no longer have to wait. We can just like binge watch in a weekend shows. But then the downside is we no longer have to wait. There was something so special about every single week, you know, knowing, okay, 7 p.m. on Wednesday night, we're going to see the newest episode, the anticipation, you know, you got your little snacks ready. I remember with Dawson's Creek, I would have girlfriends that we would watch the show at the same time, either in person or we'd be like a lot of times on the phone together, like watching it on the phone, each scene, we'd react. I think it was every Tuesday, like literally 20 plus years later. I still remember this. Be on the landline, old school phone, watching with friends. And Dawson's Creek specifically, another reason it was close to my heart was it was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina, where I grew up, going to the beach, such an amazing beach town, so nostalgic. And I feel like they filmed a lot of shows there. I think it was on the WB, which I don't even know if it's around anymore, but that was like the network that it was on. And there were a lot of these like beachy films. And I think a lot of movies are still filmed there. You know, if they're still filming movies nowadays, I know they've slowed down a lot. But God, Wilmington was just an incredible town. And I thought of even going to UNC Wilmington, which is in North Carolina, UNC. It's like one of their locations. And then I went to ASU instead. But Dawson's Creek, what a throwback. I just love seeing these actors who worked together years and years ago then team up and be on projects all these many years later. I'm sure they're having just as much fun, you know, working together again as well. You know, we're all adults now. And one thing that I think that's happening, and you hear about this, is with social media, a lot of people are feeling more lonely and isolated. This generation of adults and this wave of early 2000s content makes us remember kind of the simpler times. I saw somewhere people were talking about like millennials are the only generation where we really straddle these two eras with technology. So there was pre-social media, with smartphones, after, and just it's such a unique position to have been in and to have witnessed. And I think like the simpler life and then growing up with technology, it's just a very unique position we're in. And I think we're very nostalgic for that. So, I mean, it's no wonder that all these old school things are coming back. Everything that's old is new again at some point. That's my takeaway. Trends, shows, literally everything. Even like smartphones. Apparently now people are going back to just the basic little flip phones, which I think is kind of nice because maybe we won't be so attached to them all the time. Maybe we'll go back to looking at each other in the eyes and talking on a date or out to dinner. So going with that theme, I'm going to end this. I loved this story. There was a popular artist. Not quite yet though. So going back to Millennial, like resurgence of literally everything. I talked about Freakier Friday. I talked about Backstreet Boys at the Sphere, which if you have a chance to see them, you absolutely must. I demand you go. Guys and girls, doesn't matter. Every age, you will love it. But popular artists from that era are launching tours this year. So like Nelly, hip hop, that was another huge, I absolutely love Nelly. I saw him in Vegas years later and it was so funny because I went with my husband and it was not his jam, not his favorite type of music. But I was like front and center dancing. I think he was at like the Hard Rock before it changed over. So this was like almost 10 years ago. So much fun. Creed, of course, huge band, rock from like early 2000s, All American Rejects, literally my college backdrop soundtrack in the early 2000s in Arizona specifically, kind of like emo, Dashboard Confessionals. So much fun. So all these people are touring again, and I am so here for it. All right, another huge debate going on right now. I saw this and I just thought this was so interesting because I want to know what you guys think. So what are the 4 major US cities? Just stop for a minute and think about it. So mostly everyone agrees on New York and LA. Coming from my broadcasting background, we would always go by the Nielsen ratings, which is when you work for a local news TV station, it's just the ratings of the demographic and like the numbers of basically viewership in that demographic area in that city. So New York is always number 1, LA 2, Chicago 3, Philadelphia 4. Oh God, what was 5? Houston was like 5 or 6. Miami, I think, was like 10. Atlanta. There's always like, they'll kind of ebb and flow. I feel like when you get to like 5 or 6, because people are always like moving at different cities or losing people or gaining people. But consistently for decades, I feel like the top 3 have, of course, been New York, LA, and Chicago. So people are now talking about what are the top 4. It seems kind of arbitrary, but they picked 4 cities in the US. And for those who don't have the journalism background, it's just, it becomes kind of a matter of opinion. And so a lot of people are like saying, well, no, Chicago doesn't count. Like Miami is so much more relevant because it's more of an international city. I don't even know if that's true. Philadelphia, in the Northeast, it's a huge city, but people are saying you can't say Philly without saying Atlanta. I definitely think, New York, LA, hands down, but Miami and DC would be my votes for rounding out the top 4. I am, of course, biased because I'm from the DC area. But as far as like relevance, no hate to Philly. Miami just seems a little more vibrant, international. It's a microcosm of our country. And then San Francisco, I think that might normally be number 5 as far as like Nielsen. Love it or hate it. So what would you say? Atlanta? I mean, it's so hard to narrow down the 4. If you're not going by Nielsen, just what the most 4 relevant big cities in the country. I'd love to know what you think. Speaking of kind of global citizenship, this new list was released about the easiest countries for Americans to get dual citizenship. People have been talking about this a lot lately. We keep seeing this time and time again, but Portugal keeps topping the list because they offer these golden visa programs. You can apply with a clean criminal record and make investments in Portugal. So in either real estate or a certain donation, or, these are their like boxes you have to check to be able to get the dual citizenship if you're an American citizen. But you can do labor creation, whatever they consider that, basically job creations or capital investments. The downside to dual citizenship in Portugal and US is apparently it's like super long processing time. Another popular city for dual citizenship, I believe this is all from Travel and Leisure. because people are talking about this lately. A lot of people are talking about, okay, well, the US is increasingly scary. There's these mass shootings every day, it feels like. And so they're considering dual citizenship. In addition to Portugal, there's Italy. I think I read that you have Italian ancestors born after 1860s, so like a while ago, you can pretty easily qualify for dual citizenship. Another place was Argentina. They said it's relatively easy, but there's currently high inflation there and the job market isn't as strong. So it remains popular, but maybe not as popular as Portugal or Italy. Something to think about. Okay, this is what I was talking about earlier. I just want to end on a high note, and I do love these positive stories. So the kindness of strangers made this one man reverse his death wish. Okay, so last December of 28th of last year, no, a 28-year-old artist, I misread that, Joseph Awua Darko, he's from Ghana, and he announced that he wanted to die. He was really depressed. He had been diagnosed as bipolar. He was really active on social media. He was a well-known artist. And he had actually moved from Ghana to the Netherlands, where in the Netherlands they have legal medically assisted suicide. So he was ready to end his life. He was just really not in a good headspace. So he went on social media and he basically publicized this. He said, look, I'm just really depressed. And dinner invites started rolling in. The connection of human beings, seeing this artist who was down and out, these people in the Netherlands just started reaching out to him directly. It started through Instagram. It evolved into a project that he later called the Last Supper Project. And basically, anyone could go in and they could sign up to cook a meal through this calendar in his Instagram bio. So many strangers started signing up to host him. And as of July, last month, he says he no longer feels the need to end his life. And it's actually inspired him to have more connection and foster that and, meet up with strangers and really just kind of have this vibrance and this resurgence of this thirst for life. And I just thought that was so inspiring and kind of a much needed message that maybe sometimes we forget, but it's so easy to be disconnected nowadays and maybe have a parasocial relationship with people online, but we need to remember how important it is to meet up in person and have that connection and break bread and share our stories. And if someone is feeling lonely, just pick up the phone or invite them for a walk or a coffee, or just knowing that someone cares can sometimes make a world of a difference. So on that note, I had so much fun chatting with you guys today on the show. That is a wrap of episode 6 of Breaking Blonde. Time is flying. If you guys have any suggestions for topics you'd like me to kind of do a deeper dive, I am always here. Send me a DM or a message. Please, thanks for tuning in, and please share, subscribe, or like to Breaking Blonde on YouTube, listen to Spotify, Apple Music, all of the above. I'm always here too. So like I said, reach out. I would love to hear from you. Thanks again. Until next time.